Now, obsessional desire is the dynamo that gives life and action to definiteness of purpose. Obsessional desire. An obsessional desire is a desire that... how do you make a desire obsessional in the first place? Let's get into that. That's right, by living with it in your mind, calling it into your mind and seeing the physical manifestation of it out there somewhere in the circumstances of your life. In other words, if you have an obsessional desire for enough money to buy a new Cadillac, let us say, and you're now driving a Ford or something less than a Ford, you want that nice new Cadillac, you don't have enough income to pay for it, you don't have enough money, what do? Well, the first thing you do, you go over to the Cadillac agency and get one of those nice new catalogs with all the models in it, and you turn over and you pick out the model you want. And every time you get in that Ford and start down the street, just before you start off, you kick off the starter and then you shut your eyes for a few moments and you see yourself sitting on top of a nice new Cadillac. And as she purrs down the street, as you give her the gas, you imagine right now that you already have, you know you own this Cadillac, but you don't exactly have possession of it. But for the time being, you're there at the wheel of your Cadillac. Sounds silly, doesn't it? It may sound silly, but it is not silly. I can assure you it's not silly. I talked myself into my first Rolls Royce that very way. Did I ever tell you about how I got my first Rolls Royce? Do you remember that? My putting myself out on a limb one evening in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, saying that I was going to have it, that before the week was over and I didn't have enough money in the bank to get it. My student, sitting right in that audience, who had exactly the same car that I described, even down to the the orange-colored wire wheels. And he called me at my hotel next morning and said, "Come on down and I have your car, Mr. Hill." And I went down there and he had it. He had the legal transfer made out, and the keys he had ready to hand to me. All he wanted to show me was a little trick or two that you had to know about a Rolls Royce in order to get the best results out of it. He took me down Riverside Drive, we drove a little bit, and he got out and shook hands with him and said, "Well, Mr. Hill, I'm very happy to have had the privilege of letting you have this nice car." Wasn't that a wonderful thing for a man to do? Now, he hadn't said, nothing had been said about price. He said, "Well, the price, you fix the price. I'll tell you what I paid for it." But he said, "You need it worse than I do. I don't actually need it at all. But you do need it, and I want you to have it." Be careful what you set your heart upon through obsessional desire, for the subconscious mind goes to work on translating that desire into its material equivalent. Self-discipline cannot be attained overnight. It must be developed step by step by the formation of definite habits of thought and physical action. You must go through the motion of doing something about it. In other words, when Allen comes on the stage here, do you notice the chemical change that takes place in your mind while you're doing that? Of course you do, and I notice it. I feel it out there on the stage, 50 feet removed from you. I can feel the vibrations of it. But suppose that you just sat still in your seats and you repeated those words in a monotone like I'm talking now, and didn't put some zump into your voice, and wouldn't do you a bit of good in the world, would it? No, you learn to become enthusiastic by acting enthusiastically. That's definite. Now, the reason I admonish you to be careful what you set your heart upon is this. If you follow the instructions laid down in this lesson, if you set your heart on anything and stand by that decision, you're going to get it. And be sure before you start any obsessional desire about anything that the thing that you're desiring is something that you will be willing to live with after you get it, him or her. I thought you'd get a kick out of that one. Oh, yes, I know. I see a lot of cackling around in this audience of people who are married, who understand exactly what I'm talking about. What a marvelous thing it is to demonstrate in your own mind something that you desire above everything else, something that's hard to get maybe, and then come to know after you've demonstrated that you want to live with it the rest of your life. Well, that's a marvelous thing. But be careful what you demonstrate before you start demonstrating. You may be interested in knowing that out of the 500 or more men that collaborated with me in building this philosophy, every one of them was immensely wealthy. I didn't pay any attention to any other kind. I was only after the ones that had made a big demonstration financially. I had no time to fool with the little boys. That wouldn't apply today, but it applied then. And you may be interested in knowing that every single solitary one of them had abundance of wealth, but they did not have peace of mind. They neglected in demonstrating their wealth to demonstrate along with it the circumstances of life through which they would not worship that wealth, through which it would not be a burden to them, through which they would have peace of mind in their relationships with their fellow men. They didn't learn that lesson. If those men could have had the remarks that I made when I stepped on this stage for the first 5 minutes, if they could have had that lesson back in the early days before they came immensely wealthy, they would have learned how to balance themselves with this wealth so that it would not have affected them adversely. To me, the most pitiful sight in the world is to see an extremely rich man who doesn't have anything else but riches, but monetary riches. And there are a lot of them in this world. The next most pitiful thing is the boy or girl who has come into possession of great riches without having earned them. Your power of thought is the only thing over which you have complete, unchallenged control. Control by the power of will. In giving human beings control over but one thing, the Creator must have chosen the most important of all things. This is a stupendous fact that merits your most profound consideration. If you give it this sort of consideration, you will discover for yourself the rich promises available to those who become master of their mind power through self-discipline.